everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Talk to Rami. This is Rami, your host, and today is an amazing day in Austin, Texas, because we are seeing fall weather, which is, I love it. No more heat. But today, I'm sitting with Javier Mercedes here, the entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur who changed his life from corporate America to be a YouTube iconer and all that good stuff. We're going to get to know him and his talent and how he did it. We all might learn something. This is all about learning. Javier, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Oh, thank you.
I love your set, by the way. Like your whole studio and setup is like it. The one thing I love about being a creative is when you can come into a space and you have all of the tools afforded to you to just start being creative, and you can come in here, hit record, and start having conversations as opposed to setting everything up, breaking everything back down, all that stuff. It's awesome.
Thank you so much. And that's good hearing from the professional YouTuber and the video guy and the audio and editing guy. That means a lot to me and my staff. Thank you so much. But tell me a little bit about yourself. I know we off camera, we were talking about you were working the corporate, the startup, all that stuff. And one day you decided you want to be a YouTuber. Mm-hmm. That was a big risk.
Yeah. So I guess I'll go all the way back to like when I was a little kid. I'll age myself here, but I started out with a tape player, and I would sit by the TV while my older brothers were playing normal Nintendo, and I would take the tape player, and I would This is what you had to do back in the day to record. You would hit both the play and the record button in the tape player at the same time. And what I would do is I would have my brothers play the video game, and I would record the music coming from the video game, from the TV. And then I would hit pause after the music was done for a level. And then I would go over to my brothers and start interviewing them. And I'd be like, hey, what did you think about that boss on level 9 of Mega Man? And then I don't know how old they were at the time, but they would be like, he was cool. And I'm like, all right, cool. Let's go back to the music. So I was basically hosting my own radio show on a tape player. And I have this whole series of things called Goobs tapes. That back when I was like a little kid, and I completely forgot about that kind of thing until I was going through really, really old footage that my dad had of me. Fast forward into the future, I end up going to school for audio engineering at Ball State University, get an audio engineering degree, was lucky enough to get some internships and get some networking and things of that nature to eventually get a full-time job at Doppler Recording Studios in Atlanta. And I was there for 4 years. What I did at that place it was about a studio of 9 or 10 engineers. And by day, it was a place where you would record artists and mainly actors and actresses in commercials, because Atlanta at the time, and I actually think they still do, they have a lot of tax incentives for movie features to be filmed there. Okay. And because movie features were being filmed there, in post-production, places that were editing that film in LA would be like, oh, hey, we need Morgan Freeman to re-record this line for whatever it may be. And because Morgan Freeman may be at Atlanta recording a completely different movie, they get on the phone, they're like, hey, can you stop by XYZ studio, re-record that line for us, because maybe there was an ambulance going by, we need a new type of read, whatever it may be. They use a studio like ours to record that stuff. So I got to work with a lot of amazing people, Morgan Freeman included.
Really, I love that guy, his voice and his character, man. It's amazing.
Yeah. Funny enough, while I was there, I mean, it's very unprofessional to be like, hey man, can I get a selfie with you, or can I get your autograph? So a lot of what I would do is, before we would start recording, I would say, hey, like, Mr. Freeman, it's awesome to meet you. My name's Javier, while he's like behind the mic. And then he'd say something like, oh, hi, Javier, nice to meet you. So I have this string of all of these celebrities saying my name. And that was kind of, that was kind of my way of professionally getting them to, I guess, like, prove that, like, oh, I met so-and-so.
That was genius.
Yeah. But that was an awesome job. I got to record a lot of different actors and actresses for various lines. Some of the stuff was like kind of crazy because when you think about it, even something as simple as breathing, they would have to come in and record. I have this story where I was recording with
Really?
Aaron Paul, the sidekick to Bryan Cranston, I believe is his name, on Breaking Bad. He was recording for Need for Speed, and just one of the scenes is the car drives off the bridge and he falls into a river and he has to sit there and like he's swimming in the scene. Well, you're not going to get like a microphone right up on him when he's in the middle of a river, right? So he comes in and he has to like breathe heavy for that whole time period of like acting like he's swimming. The reason I'm bringing this story up is because in a normal situation, what we do is we play back the scene for the actor or actress, and then they look at whatever it is, and then they'll record the scene. So I'm on the phone with the people in LA that are making or that are editing this movie. Aaron Paul's in front of me in the studio. He's about to record his thing. So I start playing back the video for him, and he starts to like breathe heavy and like he starts acting everything out. Well, the scene's like a minute long and I'm not recording because I'm like, in my mind, it's supposed to be, hey, we're supposed to just like, this is just playback, but I'm not going to like stop him. So he like starts getting lightheaded because I don't know if you know this, but like try just breathing heavy for like 30 seconds. You start to get lightheaded. So the take ends and I stop it. And this is like one of the first times in my career where I realized that you have to own up to your mistakes. And it's like, this is a very expensive production. The people in LA have contacted our studio. So I'm representing the studio on behalf of everybody else there and in that staff. And it's a very one-on-one situation where I don't want our reputation to falter because of my mistake. So I come on the little microphone, the talkback mic afterwards, and I have to talk to the producers, the director, and Aaron Paul and be like, hey, I'm really, really sorry. I did not realize that we were recording that take. I realized that you're like, this is happening, like you're short of breath and everything. Can we please do another take? Because after the fact, it would have been way more horrible if they just would have went on and then when they expected the files from us and they didn't get that file, they would have been like,
well, you didn't tell us.
Hey, by the way, the rest of Hollywood is never going to work with you again because like if this is your product. So obviously they weren't happy with it. Aaron wasn't happy with it, but he was just like, all right, let's get it. Let's do it. Cool. But it was a learning experience for me to, one, always own up to your mistakes, but two, the bigger one was always run a backup. So from every single point on that instance moving forward, I always ran a backup. Case in point, further on in my career, see, I'm kind of weaving this into my career's trajectory. I was at that recording studio for 4 years, and I went from there and I started doing video editing at a website called The Chive. And while I was there, I had my audio engineering experience. So the owners of The Chive came up and they're like, hey, you're audio engineer. You want to record our podcast? And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I used to do. Cool. Fast forward, one of our first guests was John Cena, as well as Mark Cuban. I got to record him in his like personal space courtside at the Dallas Mavericks stadium. But fast forwarding to John Cena, we fly out to WWE, SmackDown, whatever. And, John Cena is due to come on in like a couple hours, and we get just a small chunk of time with him backstage to do this podcast. And he's a really big fan of the website, loves the guys that do the podcast. And I go to record it. Mind you, we've flown from Austin to Washington, D.C. to do this podcast, get everything set up. And they do the whole podcast. Love John Cena. Guy's phenomenal. He like talks to everybody in the room just as if
to get to know him.
Yeah, just the like amazing dude. we, again, I go to stop the podcast after everything is done, and my card reader says SD card error. And that means basically, I don't know for a fact if I've lost that whole recording, that we've come here. John Cena has been gracious enough to give us his time. And then obviously my bosses flew us out there to do the thing. But this is a twofold. After that, we were going to record some skits for social. So I didn't know what happened with the recorder, but we were just like, we were firing. And they were like, all right, we got to record these video skits. So we go to record the video skit. The people handling his schedule were like, all right, we can only do this in one take because he's got to get going. And like, rightfully so, right? And so I get everything set up. I hit record and we do the skit and I go to play it back for them. And there's no audio on the video that we played back for him. And I immediately realized that the same recorder that I was using to record the podcast didn't record the audio during the video. And then in my mind, I'm like, oh crap, that means I don't have the podcast. So,
oh my God.
And immediately I go back to my experience of before. And here's the part that I haven't said is ever since that first iteration of not having a backup, I always run a backup. So in that instance, what I did is I have one recorder and that recorder is always sending signal to another recorder. So I get the audio signal going to two places regardless of what's happening. Now the signal, I can't split it out into separate tracks, but at least I had the whole podcast and I know for a fact I had it. So the main recorder went down. So I know that I had that one. Now, twofold, when we recorded that skit, I had the responsibility to approach John Cena and the people, like he's almost at the door and he was none the wiser. He didn't know that I didn't record the whatever, but I was like, hey guys, I don't think we got audio on that one. Can we just please do another take really quick? And obviously my bosses are like, what? Like, all right. But they're playing it cool. They're like, yes, we'll definitely do one if John's down for it. And dude, John Cena, he's just so cool. He's like, yeah, man, obviously let's get it. Like, we got to get this perfect. And they do it. So it actually worked in both of our favors because I was able to take the two takes and splice the skit together. And I ripped out the recorder I was using, just used the camera audio, and I was able to get it completely fine. But after he left, I approached my bosses and I was just like, so the SD card reader gave me an error on the main recorder, but I was recording a backup and I had the backup. And I also had the thing. They're like, okay, cool. So we got it all? I was like, yes, we got it all. And I cannot stress enough, if you're in any type of production, having some sort of backup throughout whatever you're doing.
Especially the sound, because sound is, in the production as we do and you do, is pretty much is a lot. Like, I know that, video is important, but, especially when you have an error on the SD card or the recorder, is a disaster. We had some scenarios like that, but we had a backup. But one, we didn't have it. We lost it. And sometimes, the guest is coming far away or here and say, oh, shoot, we didn't get it.
Yeah.
Or it was a mono or was it, oh, my God. Yes, it happens. But as you said, you better be ready. Life is like that, isn't it?
Yep.
Your life is like that. You got to have I'm not saying you got to have a backup plan, because apparently you jump into the swimming pool, left everything and said, I want to be a YouTuber. And you grabbed the camera and then you left. Mm-hmm. And then you said, I want to do it. But when you decided to do that, did you think about any obstacle? Did you think about you might fail? Did you think about, okay, it might not work, or if it doesn't work, what are you going to do? You just said, go.
Yeah. So I was at the Chive, and I was at the Chive for about 4.5 years. And while I was there, I eventually became the senior video editor. And what ended up happening is anybody that came to our company to work as an editor or just in the content department.
By the way, did you go to a school for video editing, or you just
no audio editing? So
for the video you just learned by yourself?
Yeah.
Wow.
the but the thing is they kind of have some parallels in terms of when you're using the software and just the pace and things of that nature. So what would end up happening is we would need to onboard other people into our department to help us create original content. And I was part of the staff that would onboard them for the editing portion. And most of the time, in fact, like basically all the time, whenever I would onboard somebody for our editing, they would always say at the end of it, like, oh man, Javier, it's like the way that you taught X, Y, and Z was really awesome. And most of these people, or all of them really, were already really good at editing, but there's just certain processes that you'd have to do to like follow how our branding is and things like that. But I would also show them a trick or two with like hotkeys or something like that. And they're like, oh my gosh, I got so much faster doing X, Y, and Z. So after being there for a couple years and every single person coming to me and saying like, whoa, you taught me this, you taught me that, you taught me this. I was like, whoa, is there a way to scale this? And I was like,
that's usually the entrepreneurial mind that works like that. We cannot make a career out of it.
Yeah, so YouTube would be a great place to do that. So I was like 4 years in, and I started doing some like behind the scenes things and doing some reviews of like the camera gear that we used and just basically teaching the production process as I saw it from what we did. The same way that I would teach the people that we were onboarding, I'd be like, hey, when you run into this situation, do X, Y, and Z this way. When you run into it, whatever it may be, this is how I would approach it. So I started making tutorials in that same vein on YouTube, and some of them took off. Once I saw that there was some traction there, I already had one kid, and my wife was pregnant with a second, and she kind of pulled me aside, and she was like, look, if you want to like pursue YouTube full time, it's not going to get any easier with our second kid on the way. So I actually looked this up the other day, and I had under 1,000 subscribers. I didn't even have 1,000 yet. Quit my job and pursued.
Oh my God.
And went, I was like bawling, talking to my bosses, and I was like, I think I'm going to try and do this like full time, like just like
How
shaking
was
their
reaction?
Oh man, they were all for it. I mean, obviously they were distraught that I was
They don't
leaving.
want to lose you.
Yeah, but they saw like, hey, this is what he wants to do. Like they were all for it. They even gave me some of the gear that it, like from the company to help jumpstart me, which is like, thank you so much. So I would say about in the beginning, I was just grinding. I was making tutorials, trying to do as much as I could and just offload my brain onto a video format teaching wise as much as I could. But obviously you got to pay some bills. So I would say I was about like 10% for like YouTube at that point, and then 90% still doing freelance, still getting hired by the same company I just worked for. Then other people that I met through that network that were like, hey, we heard that you're free now. Can you come work on this thing and that thing and that thing? So I was just freelancing, and then everything in between I was doing YouTube. Next year happens, then it starts to turn into like 30% YouTube stuff, then like 50%, then 80%. And now I'm at the point where I can do 100% content creation. And then I pick and choose what I want to do freelance wise. Like just right before I came here to talk to you, this whole past weekend, I was helping shoot the social stuff for ACL Festival,
Yep.
which
It's amazing. Yeah.
when they approached me first, they were like, hey, do you want to like do this kind of stuff? I was like, that sounds awesome. One, because I love that kind of content because it has a deadline. Like you have to shoot it and have it done like that day. There's no like back and forth
Like
between
TV
the client
reporters.
and like all that. Like, yes, you still have to come up with the best possible product, but there's no arguing with the clock. You can't like the event's happening. We got to get this thing out. Like you just got to go. You got to go, and then you have to make your decisions and everything. I love that kind of content where it's not a whole month process of a production where you made something, goes back to client, then it comes back, then you go back and forth for so long. I do like those, but from a freelance standpoint, now I tend to do more stuff where I know that there's a finite date that you have to get that material out. Yeah.
That's, it's a lot of pressure because I know I have a friend, he's a, TV anchor and a camera guy and, work with these people. He said, when we do a news 6 p.m. and then we shoot something like at a format, it's got to go out. Like he's a shooter, he's an editor, all that stuff. I understand the pressure when you explain it too. But, that made you to keep on going from like a 30%, 10% to 30%. What was going in your mind? Like, I know you got motivation, because you got to be persistent. Because most of the entrepreneurs, they want everything right now is going to happen. But it's not going to happen. The reality is not like that. You have to really work it. You have to, you can plan it, but it's still, you have to keep on going and going and going, that eventually you get there. I always tell people, you drive at night, how many feet can you see? 20, 30, your headlights. But as you go forward, the road would unfold and you go from here to Houston. You have a long travel with the 20 feet visibility of the headlight. Life, I think, is like that. But for you, that you said, okay, I'm in the 30%, and your wife, you had the next kid too. And that's a lot of responsibility. And I salute your wife for supporting you.
Oh, me too. Trust me.
Because
I took a huge dive on how much money I was making for like the first couple of years.
There's a lot of, the entrepreneur's life goes sour because of the support. It's tough. It's really tough. I've been there. I have done it. It's tough. One day you are zero. One day you are hero. It just doesn't work the way we want it. But what was the biggest thing that was going to your mind that you said, I wanna go, I'm gonna do it? Was it fame? I don't think so. It was
No, not at all.
It's just helping others, because I think you're an educator. Because I was watching your stuff, you really want to educate, and you're doing a fantastic job on that.
Yeah, for me, it was more when I was looking up tutorials on how to do. So specifically what my channel is about at this point is a lot of tutorials on a video editing software called Premiere Pro, made by Adobe. And the type of tutorials that I saw were how to do certain things in the software, but where I saw the gap, or what I wanted to see more content of, was people in the position that I was in, being behind the camera, recording podcasts, recording daily social content and all that stuff. Like, where were the processes to ingest footage, label footage, and also when you get two cameras that are out of color sync, how do you sync the audio between all of the cameras really quickly? Like, all that stuff. I just wanted to be a source of that kind of information, of everything that I'd learned over the years, to put it onto a YouTube channel, where, as opposed to which I do these type of tutorials now, but like, if you're looking for a certain thing in Premiere Pro, here's that button. Mine was more from a production standpoint. That's the driver for me in the beginning. Now it's very much the idea of being able to, and this is the parent in me, like, my kid gets sick, I have the time allotted to stay at home with my kid, and like, I can spend the day with them. Then the next day I can start making more content. Or if something comes up, like I need to go do an errand for some other thing, like I can go do that because I have that schedule now. Before, I was burning the midnight oil, especially for some of the projects, of like, you gotta shoot the thing and then get it out either the night of or the next morning, and sometimes you're just getting no sleep. And as you get into your 30s, like, you can't do that as much anymore.
With 2 kids.
Yeah. So that was the other part for me, was like, man, I want to keep doing this, but how do I find a way to do this and not burn myself out? So at this point, I I feel like I have the ability to be more creative, and I at least have the boundaries per se of, let's say I want to make a tutorial, and so one of the new things with Adobe's that they just released is their text-based editing. So like anything that we're saying right now is automatically transcribed, and then you can edit your video according to the text as opposed to looking at the audio waveforms.
Wow.
So when I look at an idea like that, I can be like, all right, what's like a fun way that I can do that creatively, as opposed to just like, here's this button, here's how you do that. Funny, I think one of my like best ones of that was I wanted to do a tutorial on how to find guides and rulers inside Premiere Pro. So it's the idea of, if you want to place something on the screen, you can put a guide on the screen, and then you can have all of your words line up to that. Or you just want to put somebody in the center and make sure they're right in the center. You just throw a ruler and a guide on the screen and whatever. That tutorial could probably be like 10 seconds long, but it took me a month to shoot, and I ended up making an entire rap video about it.
Oh,
And that's one of the ones that Adobe, the actual engineers and everybody at Adobe, were sending me direct messages saying how much they loved it. But like, when I make content like that, I know for a fact that 50% of my audience will love it. 50% will be like, you don't need to rap why are you trying to rhyme? Just tell me, where do you find the guides? Where do you find the rulers? And like, for that, like, I completely get it. Cause like, sometimes when you're in the thick of things, you just want to know where those things are. So I put it into the rap that like, at the very end, like, hey, by the way, can you please allow me this one time to be this creative with a tutorial? Because I understand that maybe you were just trying to find this really quick, but I made a whole rap song about it. And hopefully the information sticks with you, because it's like this whole thing with music getting like repeated in your head, you know? Anyhow, yeah. To answer your question though, it would be the fact that I can be as creative as I want and put constraint on whatever project that I'm doing, to the point where I want to do it creatively. I think in order to be creative, it comes out of constraint. So sometimes I'll just be like, all right, I'm only going to allow myself to do, I don't know, this whole tutorial from like one shot. So how do I do that but still keep it interesting? And that's like the kind of things that I think of each week when I'm trying to create content, of like keeping it fresh, but also giving the information that I need.
Okay. Have you created any online courses, or are you thinking to do that, like your classes, or you just put it on the YouTube as go watch?
Yeah, I get approached all the time to do that. I think I would, but I like the idea that my information, for now, the stuff that I'm putting out there is free on YouTube. What's also funny is I was on that gig for ACL, and one of the other editors next to me had this question about slow motion and what shutter speed to shoot and what are the camera settings and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, I have a cheat sheet for that. And I went to go look it up on the internet, and I found out that on the top of the search, somebody else has my cheat sheet as a lead magnet for their email list to their like Premiere Pro course. So it's basically like they're taking my name and my product and just shoving it into their course. And I was like, what is this? I've had a couple instances of that where they'll use my name and image to get people into the door. And I haven't even taken these courses before, but I know that like some people, I don't even know if it's considered stealing. Maybe I don't know.
Yes, like that's considered stealing.
When it's online like that, it's like such a Wild West thing. But in terms of the courses thing, maybe in the future, I do get approached a lot by other people that help build those things to have me actually host one. But for right now, what I like to do is have my content be free, and then I sell products like preset packs and other things like that. So if you find enough value in my content, then if video editing your thing. I have like transition packs. I have a split screen pack. I have like a YouTube subscribe type of thing, and like one that helps move your assets around the screen. And I build those every so often, and those are the ones where people kind of support. And it's like the YouTube channel is top of funnel, then that gets distilled into the more people that actually need those products.
You know, as a professional, you know, video and audio, you know, individual, you know that audio and video is rising like crazy. I think in the next whatever years is that soon everything is going to be video and audio. Nobody wants to read, you know, or it's going to have a subtitle, and everybody wants to create content. We create content right now. I'm sitting here talking to Rami, talking to you. It's a content creation. And these days, all the from influencer or somebody wants to be influencer or businesses, small businesses, enterprises, they all want to create content. What is the process actually? Everybody asking. I get this question a lot. I want to create content, but I don't know how. Is there any process like a number one, number two, number three, or is it case by case, or, you know, what is your goal? What is the nature? You know, what you want to do? What is the process? Do you think, is there any process, or have you used any?
Yeah. So I guess my best way to answer this question is that from my point of view, I'm more geared towards the tutorial niche. So I definitely understand that there is other ways of creating content out there that like people are way more specialized in. But if it's something where you want to go online, and something I just did today was change a transistor for my doorbell. So it's like, let's take that for instance. Like, all right, let's say you've never changed a transistor for your doorbell, and you just got one of those new smart doorbells that has the video thing. And I didn't know that you needed to do this, but when you get one of those, you need to supply more power to it. And you do that by changing the transistor. So, or transformer, I'm saying transistor, it's a transformer. Yeah, it's more than meets the eye. Anyhow, when you go to change it, you have to pop the thing out. You have to change the neutral, the positive, and your ground. Then just like pop the thing back in, and then put the wires, and then it goes to the signal. Hopefully you turned off the breaker before you did all that, so you don't electrocute yourself. But that's something where when I went to go do that, I didn't look at the instructions. I didn't like ask anybody to do it. I just went to YouTube. I just like went, that's
everybody does that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so
I do it all the time. How to?
Yeah, exactly. And this is where, again, there's so many different types of content where if you are somebody that does a specific kind of thing, and you know that you have 10% more knowledge than another person in whatever that field is, and you get people asking you a question about X, Y, and Z in that field, that's when you can start to ask yourself, oh, is there a way to scale this? And in the case of that one where I'm going to change a transformer, that's one where I know I'm going to go look up that video. So if you have those instances where you go do something, and then you went to go change it, and you're like, all right, maybe that wasn't like too hard. These are the things that happened to me while I was trying to change that transformer. Like I accidentally dropped one of the screws, and then it went way into my attic. And then I had to go find a different screw that would like fit it. So that one of the things is, when you're watching those videos, the people will say like, oh, by the way, or this is what I try and do with my Premiere Pro tutorials. I go through every single part of the process, and I say to myself, what else could happen to a user if they don't follow this a certain way, or maybe it's a different situation or whatever it may be, just like that screw fell into the attic, you can say to somebody, hey, by the way, make sure you put this in a safe place, because one time this happened to me and I lost a screw and then I lost like 5 minutes trying to find a screw.
Or take a picture from the wire before you take it out.
I could show you my phone. I could show you my camera roll right now, and I did take a picture of it.
I learned that in the hard way. I took it out and said, how was it? And said, oh, and the breaker pop. That's a good.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the kind of stuff where you give those tidbits that's not going to be in a manual right off the bat. And if it's not something that's a how-to, maybe it's just your own experience. Again, this is more in the line with what I'm used to. So how I got started on YouTube was doing the, and it might be the same cameras that you're using here, but doing reviews of like the cameras that we use, and like, hey, here's the things that after using these for like a couple years, these are the things I like, and these are the things that I don't like. And here's how you overcome those like pros and cons and things of that nature, and just make a list. And if it's a bullet point list, just put a camera in front of you, start talking about whatever it is, and then hit the off button. And then if you want to put B-roll in there, what is the best thing is if you are describing something, show it rather than tell it. And or if you're saying like, for instance, the cameras that are used to film things like this back in the day, by back in the day, I mean like 4 years ago, a big thing used to be in America that they didn't record past the 29 minute, 59 second mark, because it was just like this arbitrary cutoff that they did because of like overheating, but it really wasn't, because cameras just got so good. But it was like, oh, we'll just have this in here. And then it was like an upgrade if you had a camera that could go past that. Then Sony released the A7 or the A7. It had a C in it.
Yeah.
Anyhow, no, the 6700. Anyhow, that camera could record nonstop, and it was affordable, and you could have that whole mirrorless look and whatnot. So once that camera came out, I was like, even if you're like wanted to do anything podcast wise, you should get this camera, because it does this, and you don't have to worry about the whole recording thing, and you don't have to hit record twice randomly in the middle of the conversation, and also like try and hide it by switching to a different camera and like all that stuff. Don't have to worry about it overheating, all that kind of thing, all of those kinds of things. So those were the types of issues that I would talk about with the camera gear. I would then parlay that into things like my video editing. And then anytime I came across something that was somewhat related to the niche of basically video content creation, like I did a video on, I had to change my ear pads to my Bose headphones, and I didn't even realize just how janky they looked. But I was like, man, these look really bad. Do you have to buy a whole new pair of headphones, or can you just change these, like the ear pads? And then I looked it up, and then they'd sell them on Amazon. I forget for how much, but I did a little video on that. It's like one of my best performing videos, because like I just randomly, I was like, oh, maybe I'll just record myself doing this process and explain to the audience the problems that I had. And with those headphones in particular, I have no idea why they did this with their design, but there's these like teeth on them, and it's really hard to get the earbud to set in the teeth the right way. So I explained like what I did to like set it into the teeth and what you should hear with the click and all that stuff. And most of the comments under that video were like, oh my gosh, I had the same problem, blah, 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 blah. I can guarantee you, if you have any sort of problem during your day, that you are not the only one that has that.
I'm so happy you mentioned that, because we as a human have this tunnel vision that when something happens or we face the problem and challenges, we really think, I am the only one facing this. As soon as you shift your mind and you say that, no, there's other people out there that they're facing what I face right now, losing a loved one, grief, failing in a business, go bankrupt, get divorced, all that stuff, somebody went through it. What can learn from it, or are we willing to go out there and find a solution? Which is, you're absolutely right. The problem, your problem, is going to be a solution to somebody else's problem. That's what you're recording that. That's what you're saying that. And that's really wonderful. But there is another debate right now is out there. I hear it all the time. I know you do that. It goes like this. You don't need a professional camera. Just use your iPhone if you want to create content. Just go, grab it and go. What is your take on this?
I agree.
You agree?
Oh yeah.
Even though you are a professional.
So I would, hands down, if I could use my iPhone to just like, and I do
For the content creation.
Yeah, and I do use my iPhone for a lot of my content creation. Perfect case in point of this is we were just doing the ACL festival, right? If you go and look at their Instagram page, the stuff that we do with the professional work looks amazing. Like the crew that shoots that stuff it's like every single shot I see, you're like, man, that's so buttery smooth and good. But on that same page is footage that was shot with so there'll be like one Instagram reel where it's super highly produced, which I think from their standpoint makes complete sense because they need that for marketing and everything. But I love what they do with their Instagram because they also have people just walking around with their iPhone and they'll just be kind of front and center during the concert. And let's say it's Shania Twain or Jared Leto was just here and he jumped from the top of the stage down, like, I don't know how many stories that was, but he jumped from there down to the stage. It was insane. What the iPhone allotted them to do is, one, it looks way more authentic. There's a person, they're standing in the crowd. It's when you immediately swipe to that content, it just seems familiar. Like, oh, this is just another person filming this thing. And then all of a sudden you see him jump from the from the top of the stage. But it also allows them to just get that content out there immediately. There's no having to go into which is my bread and butter, an editing program. It was this when you look at that page, there's a good variation between the professional, highly produced stuff and then the really authentic iPhone footage-esque material. And if you look at the likes and the views of the iPhone footage stuff, I would venture to say that most of those have more views and likes than the highly produced material. And I think that speaks volumes to that argument.
And I think we are going that way. As you see the new iPhone, whatever it came out, they're saying the camera is fantastic. They're getting better and better and better.
Yeah, the other part of that argument too is the barrier to entry and the rise of TikTok and YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels, which is basically everything just repackaged as TikTok stuff. But the barrier to entry for creating content and being creative that a cell phone has allotted there's none. You pick up your phone and you can do it. It's fantastic. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, it's always Gary Vee always says that. Don't create, just document. And now everybody can actually grab their iPhone and can document their journey, their trip, talking to a friend. And believe it or not, I watched the podcast was shot with 3 cell phones, like 3 iPhones, and I didn't know. I thought it's shot with the camera. But we're going that way. Plus the AI. How AI is affecting you, because everything you see right now, this video editing, I'm sure you saw it, this video editing software is coming that it chops your video. Other day, my guys, they show it to me, they kind of, I don't know, they add B-rolls to it, but you give them the whole podcast and it goes and recognize that where is a cutoff and it chops it for you. Autopod or whatever it is. What is your feedback on this increasing use of AI technology in actually visual and audio?
It's tough because I was actually just in San Francisco. Adobe invited me down there to have a bunch of different creatives and they showcase their generative AI technology. And I would say the cool thing about what Adobe is doing is that they source their material from their whole catalog of people that have actually like, it's part of their stock footage. So it's like everything, they actually give credit to whoever the thing looked at. Yeah. Which I think is very admirable. In terms of content creation and producing, I think it's kind of inevitable. If it's something if it's something like what TikTok has done and the cell phone has done to somebody who can create a video immediately, if that is then put on steroids and just skyrockets into the point where you can just, and I'm not even thinking of type-based video making. I'm just thinking of, you have an idea in your brain and you want it to be a visual medium for others to view. That would be really cool. Like just the idea of, oh, I have this idea for this thing, vroom, and it's just like there. It's like, and you can see the thing. I think that's like, in terms of people being able to produce their own content in that way, I have no idea where that would go, because it would basically be like, if you have just an ounce of creativity that you want to do, then you could basically, if you weren't handicapped by the ability of, I don't know, not knowing how to like draw a certain shading or something like that, and it's just from your brain out into the universe, that's cool. The part where it like gets kind of sketchy is when you like, where's creativity when you just like, did you actually create the thing, or was that the computer that created the thing? Like all of that type of stuff. And for that, I have no idea. I don't know.
Because you're a professional shooter, and as a shot list that you create, the AI is not gonna do that. Like the way you see the scene, the way that you shoot based on the script, based on the idea, movement, gesture, whatever it is, breathing. The AI, I don't think so, is capable to do that, and replacing the human creative part, it's going to be tough. Like how you can replace the painter, how you can, that's a stroke of the brush. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's weird because I met personally a couple weeks ago a lot of people that like what they do is AI generative art, and those people in and of themselves are already creatives. So they're people that know how to use Illustrator. They're people that know how to use Photoshop, After Effects. They're already in the space doing 3D modeling and things of that nature, and they're taking those skills and they complement it with the generative AI. So I think when you see somebody create this like amazing picture that has been done with AI, it may be that the person that's typing in that prompt is already a creative in and of themselves, and they're just like using what they've already learned to do that. Yeah.
I think the artificial intelligence is another tool. That's what I'm thinking. Like ChatGPT, is a tool. You can write, you can give your idea, but still you got to do something. And then you can use it as a tool. I don't know if we understand the depth of it, or we understand that this is another tool that we can use and scale and benefit and learn from. But that discussion is going to be on forever, I think. From now on, that AI is getting much smarter and all that stuff. But what is next for you? Like, do you really don't want to create the online courses? Well, we will take it.
Yeah,
I'm like all my staff taking it.
Yeah, I understand. The thing for me is that I would want to create it how I would want it to be.
You got all the tools.
I do, but I would want to have like a certain approach to it where I have certain projects that are filmed where they're just like fake projects, where it's like professionally done, and the people that are taking the course are actually using stuff that you would just get on a set anyway. Like you get like a podcast, and then you get like, all right, here's what you would need to do to cut that thing together. You get a video on with a bunch of B-roll and some voiceover of a alcoholic drink, and like make this thing look really beautiful, put the music behind it and all that type of stuff, where you get a whole smorgasbord of everything that you would need to know how to do as a basic editor at any kind of like content place. I'd want to put all of that into one. It's just very daunting, and I like how I have the flexibility to create what I want to create right now. But if I did do something, it would be like that. But I just don't, that's not like in my whole like content schedule. That's not where I'm at right now.
Are you studying everything every day? Because this technology, and I'm sure, I don't know if you will run out of the content one day, like with all this increasing, or how you do that. Every day you catching up with what's going on?
Yeah, well, just before I came here, it's funny enough you say that. Today is the day that there's this event called Adobe Max, which is basically think of like an Apple event when they release their iPhone. This is Adobe's version of that, where they basically just have this huge conference and they go live and they showcase, hey, here are all our new features. Now, thankfully, I already knew what a lot of that stuff was, but I didn't know what the other programs that Adobe comes out with, what those things were going to entail, and it looks pretty cool to me. But to answer your question, yes, still keeping up with the thing. The other part of that too is another reason to still take on some freelance gigs is to just keep up with like, all right, here's how this project is going. What are the has anything changed on how people do this production as opposed to like a couple years ago? And I find it pretty funny that when you boil down to the particulars, the kind of format of how content is produced is still basically the same as it was like 10, 15, 20 years ago. And I see this change for AI stuff as the same as when I went to the recording studio. After I graduated college, I went to go work at the recording studio in Atlanta, and I was their first hire in like, I want to say 20 years. These are engineers that were recording people like James Brown. Wow. And like stuff like that. And and maybe 15. But anyhow, everybody there was like very accomplished. And at that point in time, Pro Tools was 7.4, and it was on Windows XP, I think. Wow. And they were upgrading their systems and everything, going to the new Pro Tools. But these are the guys that I remember this vividly. Like bands would come in, and they were using things like tape still. And I don't mean the like old school tape where I was recording my brothers doing the video game stuff. This is like actual professional audio tape. And I have no clue how to do that. And those guys did. And that's the kind of stuff where they still have that skill set. And I can guarantee you there's some bands out there that they want to record with that aesthetic, and those people have that. Now, it was kind of a changing of the guard because like all of this digital stuff was coming in, and it's like some of those guys were at the point in their career where it's like, is it even worth it to like learn all of this new stuff? And to their credit, most of them have still that same desire and fire in them to like, no, I love audio. I love doing this stuff. So they'll learn those things. But it's like, you could just retire if you wanted to after like whatever amount of time. But I kind of see what's happening with AI as the same as when I went to that studio. Like now that I'm in my 30s and like all of this AI stuff, whenever I go to these content creator meetups or gigs or when I meet other people, most of the time they're like a lot younger and they're like all on TikTok, and like I'll be perfect case in point of this is I like to do a hyperlapse. And in order to do that, I have to take photos, and you have to take a bunch of photos, and it normally takes like an hour to 2 hours. When what a hyperlapse is a time lapse, but it's moving. So to give you an example, during ACL, I would go to a stage and then I would set myself at one perimeter side of the stage. I would take one photo, take a step, take one photo, take a step, take one photo, take a step. There's this amazing dude that sat next to me that I was working with called, he's Greg Has a Camera on Instagram. This guy comes with an Insta 360.
Oh my God.
And he walks around and he does what it took me like a whole half a day to do, and he did the thing in like maybe 30 minutes because he with the Insta 360 you can do a hyperlapse just by walking around, and then you can add some effects to it, but it automatically stabilizes the footage for you. Whereas the way that I was doing it, it may look clearer, but the thing is you can't churn out that content as quick. You can't that's more of that authentic feel, you know? He could go and get more content because of that. And the stuff that he came up with, it looked like he was flying a drone, and then he would like flip the thing on the stage, and like all this stuff looked so phenomenal. I was like, man, that's crazy. That's so cool that like, here's this process that I was like set in my ways of doing, mainly because I didn't know you could do it the other way, taking a whole bunch of photos, bringing it into Lightroom, processing those photos. Then you need to stabilize those photos. And then once you're done stabilizing, then you need to color the whole thing. He did that thing. He shot the thing in the 360. He had his phone out. He added a couple keyframes, exported it, handed it to the people to post it on social, like right then and there. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. That's like how technology.
This is where we're going, but you know, sometimes I really miss watching in the old school TV advertising, like Red Marble or you know, those old TV advertising. Sometimes I go actually watch it, and it's different. It's different world what we're comparing today. But I know you are a busy person, but if people they have question for you, where they can find you? Of course, YouTube guys. You just search your name, but what kind of material they will get their hands on, or what they learn? It's just like a troubleshoot, or really, if somebody wants to learn how to shoot his own video or the podcast, can they learn that?
Yeah, so I'm at Javier Mercedes X on, I'm still going to call it Twitter. Twitter.
Yeah, it's weird for me too.
Javier Mercedes X on Instagram, and then just Javier Mercedes. So it's Javier, and Mercedes just like the car on YouTube. The kind of content that I create is just like what I've been talking about. A lot of it recently has been Premiere Pro tutorials, but I did have a podcast called the Passion and Progress podcast for about a year and a half. And in doing so, that other podcast that I was doing for the Chive, and then before that at the recording studio, I was doing podcasts. I have a whole series on my YouTube channel, which shows you how to set up and light and record with a backup, a video podcast as well. Yeah, there's a lot, anything that has to do with video editing and video content creation. If you are interested in learning from my point of view,
and it's free. It's free, guys.
Yeah.
You know, he hasn't created that course yet, but he will one day. I promise you. But we see. But thank you so much, man. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot. And I asked you a question I always want to know. And the audience, I'm sure they'll learn a lot. But you're more than welcome to come here to our studio at any time.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're a creative, and we are here in Austin, Texas, supporting amazing people like you, man.
Let's go ATX.
Let's go ATX. And I wish you the best, and I hope we sit next time and talk about something more like new things that is coming up. Thank you.
Thank you.